Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Good to Talk. We are your hosts. I'm Marcia, inspirational speaker, author, mentor, and mother.
And my name is Kai, speaker and entrepreneur.
I am super excited this week, Kai, because we have an amazing guest joining.
Yes. We love having guests on.
Too much, but he is a prolific and award-winning author, amongst many other things, but I won't give too much away. So without further ado, let's bring on the wonderful Kwame Mcpherson. Whoop, whoop, whoop.
Hello. Tell me something. Are you both in the same country?
Yes, but in different states.
Okay, I was trying to get
it's a bit like Kingston and Montego Bay.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Well,
thank you for having our listeners a bit of a giveaway there. Tell our wonderful viewers and listeners where you are. They know we're in the UAE, but where are you?
I'm in beautiful and wonderful Jamaica.
Nice.
Oh God, I'm jealous.
I mean, you have sunshine. What are you jealous about? I have beaches.
We do have sunshine, but it's a different rhythm in Jamaica, a different rhythm and style. So I haven't been for a long time, but it's nice to have a guest giving us some sunshine and vibrations from that.
Yeah. Beautiful outside. I should have done this outside, actually. It's really nice outside.
Oh.
So please tell our listeners a little bit about yourself. We obviously want to get more into your story and ask you some deep questions, but I think you can talk about yourself best.
I always say to anyone, it's kind of, where do I start? You know what I mean? It really is that one of those things of how do you define yourself? I define myself as an entrepreneur. That's the first thing. I'm an author as well as an entrepreneur. And that's how I define myself. I love writing. It's the core of what I do in terms of my business or businesses, and then everything just spirals from there, really. And I was, if anybody wants to know who I am, it's like I have back in the day, you had a business card. Nowadays, you just Google me. It's Google.
Wow. You hear that, guess?
Yeah. Just Google.
Just
Probably not
Google.
person. Just Google. Yeah. Like I said one time before, you'll be handing out business cards, but not anymore. If somebody wants to know who you are and what you've been doing, then they can find you and they can find me. So a lot of what I've been doing, mentoring, presenting, seminars, workshops, it's all online. My digital footprint is there for everyone to see. But the main thing for me is to inspire other people to tell their stories, and I enjoy doing that. So I help other people.
As an avid writer myself, I would really be interested to know, how did you actually embark on your journey of discovering that, writing is something that, is a passion and something that you really could do as a business?
Well, funny enough, writing for me, really. And growing up in Jamaica, because I grew up here in Jamaica before I migrated back to the UK. Mm-hmm. At school, we were encouraged to write compositions and essays. Mm-hmm. And I did that, but in high school, it was fun at primary school age. But in high school, I didn't have a yearning or longing to continue that, or to. I didn't do it. I love English and history and geography. So I love those things where stories are created. But I didn't realize that they make the connection.
English, history, and geography. You like those subjects?
Yeah, I like those subjects. Yeah. So I love those subjects. So and in their own little way, they're stories. If you want to call it that. So I didn't realize that, and I didn't make the connection until I actually left Jamaica and went back to the UK. And I ended up working in the civil service. And I remember there was an incident where someone wanted a poem done. And I saw I had written some poetry, and they asked me to do a personalized poem of what a loved one. I asked them for characteristics, did a poem, they loved it. And it spiraled from there. I was featured in the civil service newsletter. And, talking about my poetry writing at the time and my journey up to that point. And then I said, okay, I'm probably good at this. So I started into competitions, getting awards, getting featured, and the spiraled from there, really. In terms of the poetry writing, the long prose and writing stories came later. And that was just the smallest. I said, you know what? Let's see what I can do in terms of writing longer pieces, and again. Yeah, and then when I found out I could do that, I started entering competitions again and started winning awards. And I said, I'm really good at this thing. But I always kept it as a hobby. You know, I kept it was always a hobby. It was always a hobby. It was never something that I would pursue as a business as I'm doing now.
Right.
Well, I love that you just leaned into that talent and that gift. I think, especially as a young man growing up and obviously going from Jamaica to UK, I don't personally hear of enough stories of where people are leaning into their gifts. And, you know, Marcia and myself often talk about different types of things on this podcast with regards to building your confidence, being your authentic self. And some people are realizing that much later in life as opposed to the earlier stages. So it's beautiful that you were able to do that. Did you have anyone that was encouraging you to lean into those things that you enjoyed? Did you know at the time that it was your passion that may later turn into your purpose or even a full-fledged career for you? Did you know, was there any role models or people in the house that were encouraging you to do that?
No, and it's funny because, like I said, throughout high school, I wasn't a writer. My brother was, and he won awards during high school. And like I said, I had no interest or no inkling for writing. But it's interesting that the way that you pose that question, because it's only after I started attending motivational seminars, you know, with the T.R. Beckers and Les Brown, you know, and Jack Canfield, and started reading a lot about that, finding a dream and a passion and that kind of stuff, and being inspired to follow it through. It was only afterwards that I started doing that. But even then, writing wasn't to the fore. And my jobs, the job that I did, was always writing based. So, for example, I was in a policy unit writing policies. I was in the local government being a company secretary. So a committee secretary, sorry. So everything that I did always had some writing element to it.
Right.
It was only after I migrated to North America, and I started to go through my personal journey in terms of finding myself and going through depression, which we're going to talk about, I'm sure. That's when it came that what was it that I was good at doing and how it helped other people and inspired other people, and that's when it came. So it like I said, writing found me. You know what I mean? In terms of the journey, the signs are there, but I didn't recognize it until I came to a point where the question was asked.
Well, I'm glad you've mentioned that point, Kwame. I feel like this is something that many of us struggle with, especially within our community. I personally have struggled with depression myself, and as you mentioned earlier, just encouraging people to share their story, because everybody has a story. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about how you ended up writing your book, My Date with Depression, basically the journey from mental uncertainty to self-fulfillment? You know, was that a healing journey for you? And can you tell us a little bit about how that journey started, what brought you to that point?
All right. So like I said, I touched on it in regards to the writing journey, and it intersects. So I had been involved in a number of businesses, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and it so happened that when I moved to Canada, that's where I ended up. I went down the basis of setting up a business with two other partners. Now, one of the partners couldn't get in, and the other one had to remain in the UK. When I mean couldn't get in, he was of Middle Eastern descent, and at the time there's a lot of angst between the West and Middle East, and he couldn't get into Canada. So I said, okay, I'm going to go anyway. So I ended up going. And once I got there, I said, well, you know, there was access to funds, and I mean, coupled with being motivated and inspired to do and go out and, you know, set up and create businesses and so on and so forth. The two of them came together, and I ended up investing a lot of money in a number of businesses, from an import-export business to a lingerie shop, retail shop business, from, you know what I mean? So there's quite a number of things that I dabbled in with other partners. But it so happened that I know I'm in property real estate, so I invested in real estate too. But it so happened that even though I was being inspired and motivated through going to the seminar workshops, I didn't have the expertise. And so happened, you know what I mean, everything crashed basically. And I lost a lot of money. So the whole angst of paying back creditors and having these people call you and credit being affected and all that kind of stuff, it played on my mind, started to play. I felt there was no solution. Even though there was, I didn't talk about the experience of what I was going through. So I internalized a lot of the stress. And that in turn resulted in me going into a place where, you know what I mean, which wasn't and wasn't a nice place. I could have gotten much worse than it actually was. But fortunately for me, I had people around me who supported and loved me and helped me through that experience. So it was based on the fact that, like I said, the finances, which is also, funny enough, one of the elements which enables people to go into that particular space. So in relationship breakdowns, or struggling with even a new birth. So there's quite a number of things that I've highlighted in my book, which can cause someone to go into to enter into that space. And for me, it was financial goals, as well as relationship angst, which came later on. So that's how I got into the space. But whilst I was in it, and like I said, it's almost, it took an element of, I had to go through that experience in order to find out who I am today. Basically, I had to be shown that everything that I had touched, everything that I had worked on, you name it, network marketing, setting off businesses, none of them worked because I wasn't true to my purpose. I wasn't true to what I'm here for. And so it's while I was going through that period of time that it was shown to me that this is what I'm good at. So this is what I need to pursue, and it became a passion. Yeah, it became a passion. When that reawakening came, when that reawakening or rebirth, if you want to call it that,
Nice.
that I had to really reflect and realize that, this is what I was good at from before.
Literally,
I was chasing other dreams or chasing what other people said I should be chasing.
Absolutely.
Can so relate, and I think it's really inspiring that you're being open and honest, because I feel like anyone that's listening to this will probably resonate. I will speak from my own personal experience that I too lived a life of people pleasing and doing everything that everybody else said I should be doing, and have also done a 180 and realized that actually the very things I loved in the beginning are the things that I do naturally and have always done.
That's right.
And that's what I should be pursuing, not what everybody else thinks that I should be doing. And I know that there's many people out there that probably feel the same. And I guess our message to them really is that it's okay to lean into what feels right, and to listen to your intuition and follow where that's taking you, because ultimately it's probably going to be your purpose, and it's probably going to be more fulfilling.
Yes, exactly.
It's literally the reason for this podcast. Marcia and I started a version of this during the pandemic, where everything was going like just crazy at the time, and we felt this chatter around us, but between our awakenings we felt quite calm, and we were all going through the same thing but in very different scenarios. So we decided to create a group, and that was a safe space for people to just have calm amongst the noise outside with all the other stuff with the pandemic. And that kind of spurred into a daily sort of, support group. And then that birthed our podcast. But when we wanted to bring that back, we were thinking, how do we rebrand it? We had a short hiatus. And in the rebrand, I just called Marcia out one day and I said, I think it literally should be called It's Good to Talk. We are both passionate about what we do. We love helping people. We love talking. We're doing so much of what we're doing daily, even on personal phone calls. Let's just stick to what we're good at and stick to what we love, which is talking, being on camera. And let's call it It's Good to Talk. And here we are now, and I think it's beautiful, because so much of sometimes what we go through as individuals, we feel like it's just us. Whether it's shame or embarrassment, we're not necessarily openly talking about it. And through these journaling tools and things that we're finding much later, that's therapeutic. But I think sometimes as women, we do the sitting and chatting on the phone, but as a man, it's amazing to hear that so much of what you're saying also resonates. Obviously, we're humans, right? But we don't, unfortunately, hear a lot of men expressing and writing and even sharing the way that you're talking about right now. So it's beautiful that you was able to go through that 360 journey and put it into a book. It's not just something you told your friend or told someone in your family. You're able to make that into something tangible someone else can read, and you've realized that you had it in you all along. So do you find other men opening up to you now that you have shared this? Is it a dialogue, or do you find it's more female readers?
No, well, it's interesting. I think it's a balance, and taking a step back in terms of the process, because it is a process. I didn't realize what the process at the time in terms of what I went through. But and the beautiful thing for me, like I said, was that I had people around me who who saw me becoming abnormal. You know what I mean? There's aspects of my behavior which they didn't recognize. So an example of that, for example, and this is no mean to demean people who go to church and stuff like that, but I wasn't a church man in the first place, and I ended up going to church.
Right.
Now, so for them, because they knew me to be more of a African-centered person in a way that's my behavior and everything. So what they did, and it was my cousin actually, who I love dearly to this day, and she said, "Michael, no man, that's not you." And she's the one who got church and all of that. So she said, "But this is not you." From all the talks that we've had, because the manifestations of my behavior was had an apartment at her house, it was a ground floor apartment, and just having the curtains drawn and being withdrawn, and all that kind of behavior, being in darkness, taking long walks and all that kind of stuff. So it's internalizing, like I said, a lot of the angst that I was going through. And like I said, when I ended up going to church now, she said, "Well, this is not you." So she then basically said to me, "There's a black bookstore that you need to go to, and to because she knows that's how I was prior to the experience that I was going through." And it was at the black bookstore actually where I started to write, because of competitions going on. I wrote, and I didn't win 1 year, and I wrote in the following year, and I won 2 awards, and then it transpired. And I said, it's wonderful, and like I said, so that was writing. The book itself didn't come about until after I had been through a lot of experience. So the experience happened like 2006, 2007. The book wasn't written until 2015.
Right.
Because I was writing a lot, but I realized that even though I was writing a lot of non-fiction and fiction, I hadn't actually written anything about me in terms of my personal. So I wrote a book in 2015, lost the manuscript, and found it again in 2020.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, 2018. And the only reason why I found it in 2018 was because I had sent it to a friend of mine, another male friend. And I said, and via Facebook, funny enough, the USB was corrupted. The laptop that I had crashed, so I lost the manuscript. I lost a lot of manuscripts. Actually. I wrote a lot, and one of the things as a writer, when you've written something and you lose it, it's one of the worst things. But
I know.
And then I was on Facebook, and I saw him to look in the DM, and I saw that I had sent it to him to read, and that's how I found it.
My gosh.
And then when I found it, I realized that now was the time for it, and then I downloaded it, had it proofread, edited, and I said, you know what? I got to push this book out,
Good for you.
Yeah, it's 2018, 2019. So 2019, I think, had a launch. 2019? Or early 2018. But had the launch, which was a virtual launch, actually. So I think it's probably about 2019. So even the cover and everything, it was inspired. All of it. The title was inspired, the subtitle was mine, and an ex-girlfriend of mine. So everything about it was inspiring. And then when I started to push out the cover, because I hadn't pushed out the manuscript yet in terms of content, and the reaction that I was getting was like, a black man on the cover of a book talking about depression. And like, yeah, it's just I'm saying, so what? What's the big deal? kind of thing. I'm a writer, right? It's to me, it was nothing, but the reaction that I was getting is like, and then I remember I was coming back from Jamaica, May 2019, and a friend of mine was having a seminar, a workshop, out in West, I think it was out in Brent somewhere, and also she said to me, "You gotta come and talk about your book." And so I jumped off of the plane. The first talk that I had was at her seminar, her workshop, and the reaction that I got from both men and women,
wow,
the book was inspiring, and it has. I've had sessions with serving and ex-soldiers of the Jamaica Defence Force, and their reaction, like over a number of weeks. And the reaction that I got from them as ex-soldiers or as serving soldiers was phenomenal, because you had men reaching out to you and said, "Boy, listen, Kwame, this is what I've been going through. I'm glad to see him." And so the reaction has been phenomenal, and there's a lot more to come with it, But men do, and I'm finding a lot more men are starting to talk. And I don't know if my book, in a sense, has given some men the permission to
100%.
I've gravitated towards my book, and women too. For because women love. There's quite a number of women who come to me. I remember there's someone who came to me talking about a friend of hers, a partner of hers, and she said, "Boy, your book would doing very well." And I said, "All right, no problem. I'll send it to you," which I did. And he called me. He called me up, and I kept following up with it. So how did you do? She said, "Boy, he's in a better space." And so yeah, it's when you get those type of reactions, you realize that you've done something which impacted on someone else's life. So it's been good. It's been great, and there's a lot more to come with it. So
I'm inspired because I've been writing my book for the last 3 years, and just hearing you say that you lost your manuscript and then you found it is an absolute sign that that book had to come out.
Exactly.
It wasn't optional, actually.
Yeah.
And maybe it wasn't supposed to come out in 2015.
Exactly.
Maybe you still had to continue on your journey, and then 2018 was the time. But the fact that, as you said, you are giving people permission to be okay with not being okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Because so many of us are just not okay.
Yeah, and I want to tell you, and it's almost like, I said, for the past 2 years going through this pandemic period, the book has taken on a wider resonance, because it's like, the past 2 years, some people been in some spaces where they never thought they would be. So my journey and my experience, it wasn't obviously about the past 2 years, but it's so synonymous in such a way that it's appropriate. It's appropriate for the time in regards to where people are at because of the past 2 years. So it has taken on a wider ramification because of that, and I'm glad for that. And that's why I said there's a lot more to come with it, because the ramifications are the outcomes of the past 2 years. I don't think we've actually started to feel really yet, in terms of wide scale, in terms of mental ill health and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot more to come with that, and I think my book is also for the right time for that. So you're right, Marcia. It was the book came out when it's supposed to come out. Like preparing everybody for what we're experiencing now.
Well, we've spoken about so many different types of mental health, because that was definitely the premise of our podcast originally. And whether it was anxiety, depression, we had a few men on the show actually, and one of our titles was, do men cry? And asking that question was so thought-provoking, because some guys would be like, oh yeah, God, all the time, versus others who go, I don't know the last time I cried, and it's not normal in my community. We actually even had a DJ on from the Asian community who was also talking about how difficult it is to express himself in his household or in his family, in his culture. And a lot of that rang true. Obviously, myself and Marcia are both, like yourself, of Jamaican heritage, and it wasn't a thing that you talked about growing up. And I think the pandemic has definitely, speeded up that conversation a lot more. But it's beautiful to see now. We are talking about self-love. We are talking about, anxiety. We're talking about schizophrenia, all these different, disorders that previously were so frowned upon that you couldn't even have the conversation. But it's almost like your book and the cover even has struck a chord with people, because you don't see depression with a black man's face on the front of it, and you just don't, and even having that conversation with the with our Asian guests, there was so much similarities in the Black community and what we've also grown up with in our household. So it's amazing that this has kind of happened and speeded up the process. How do you see the next sort of 3-4 years with that dialogue with men and women, or even young people? How do you see that, especially now you're back in Jamaica? You lived in the UK and Canada previously and stuff, but how do you see that maybe changing in Jamaica, where you are in your community?
It's interesting, because I guess because I call myself a global citizen in that regard, I've been able to experience across the diaspora and then come back to my home and see the challenges, because there are challenges in terms of, because there's a stigma around, mental health anyway, and especially in the Caribbean, and it's a matter of raising awareness. So for me, I can just imagine, I already see it. To tell you the truth, I don't really care about people's reaction in regard to my book, because my book is my book. I don't care about what men would think of my book, to tell them it's my story. But I can see where there will be challenges. There will be challenges in terms of, when I start to roll it out, I intend to have a I tend to be on TV. I tend to be, I was featured in the Gleaner when a Gleaner critic actually critiqued my book. So that was years ago. So when I started to roll out the PR stuff, it'd be interesting to see the reaction. But I think it will be because the space that we're in now is not like the space that we're in before. So it will be more accepted. That a lot more people will be welcoming and wanting to learn about that. Like I said, because the message is, like I said, we're in a different space now. Everyone, and that will make it even much more accommodated by others, as well as by those who will probably have a stigma against it. So yeah, it's exciting because I love challenges like that. I love to I'm a storyteller. That's the fourth. I help other people tell stories. Like I said, I'm telling my story, and if it resonates, then it resonates. If it doesn't, then that's okay. But then say it will touch someone, and that's my role, is to tell my story and help someone who may be in that space, and especially for younger people, because the pressures that they're under now is huge. It's immense, and a lot of them can't deal with the time that we're in. So it's also helping them too by seeing probably a male who can tell the story, and not for free. Listen, in my book, there's a part in it where I had an experience with an ex of mine. I think we went to Niagara Falls, and I remember it was very tense between us, very, very tense. I wasn't being open, I wasn't being honest, and I wasn't being transparent, and all that kind of stuff. And when I was standing up by Niagara Falls, and seeing the power of the falls at the time, and to be so close to nature and feel the power of nature, man, I put on a piece of balling. I cried, because to see the power of creation in its entirety, in that regard, and the power of it just blew me away. And then another experience I had, which is also in the book, is when I went to Ghana, and I went to Cape Coast, and the first time I've ever been to motherland, and went to one of the enslavement forts, and going into the dungeon, man, that was an experience of, man, I tell you, one piece of balling, one piece of crying, because to have that type of experience, it's a spiritual experience, going back to where your ancestors were taken from, and coming back, because one of the things when I was going through what I was going through, leading up to that time of me going into that space, when I was in the space, but when I went to Ghana, it made me realize, and like I was talking about the reawakening, and it's almost like you present yourself in front of the ancestors, and you can't present them with no mask. You can't present with all the layers and all the stuff. You have to present yourself as naked as it can be. And that's why I cried, because I didn't realize I could be that naked. And I didn't realize that all the stuff that I was wearing, all the masks that I was wearing, it was stripped away in front of them. And man, one piece of balling, man. Ball, why did I ball? But it's like we say, in Christians will call it, being baptized and coming out again and all that kind of stuff. For me, that's exactly what it felt like. It was that I couldn't stand up in front of the ancestors with all the layers, with all the stuff, with all the names and the letters or the experiences or whatever, and all the stuff that I've done. They didn't matter. What mattered was that I had to present myself in front of them as naked as the day I was born, and that's exactly what it felt like. So I cried, because it made me realize that, I had to go back down to bare skin and bones to be rebirthed in order to become who I was supposed to be, or who I am today. So there's those kind of experiences, and like I said, as a storyteller, those are stories that I have in my book, and which I want to share. I intend to share. So man, so it's gonna be interesting in talking about this stuff across the island and wherever else.
Well, it's beautiful even just listening to you share that and being vulnerable. So thank you, because not a lot of men will easily share that they cry, and obviously as females, we talk, we nurture, we cry. I cry regularly, and it's therapeutic, actually. And it's saddening sometimes when, for obvious reasons, we understand in society why men don't feel comfortable, but just hearing you talk about it so openly, I mean, even in your relationship, when you went to Niagara Falls, was that a safe space? Do you think that you could cry on a normal occasion, or was it just that the experience was so moving that you just didn't care? You know, did it affect the dynamics of the relationship afterwards? Did you kind of like, sorry about that, or were you just like, this is me,
No.
and it moved me, and I'm crying?
Yeah. No, it was the latter, because because again, like I said, I think that was my first interaction with, in terms of the power of Mother Nature in that regard of and how we relate to it as a human being, and how we relate to nature. So it was that power, because I never felt that power up to that point, you know.
You're just in awe.
So, yeah, it was sort of with the power of that, like as a creation, it made me realize that as an individual, in regards to the magnificence of creation, and as me as an individual at that point in time, I'm also magnificent. So it was all those things coming together, you know, and obviously the tension within the relationship, coming away from that. I think she left probably about a couple of days after, because she was in the UK and I was in Canada. So it wasn't, and then actually it helped us. And then from that experience, she said let's go to Ghana. And that's when, so she probably saw what was going on, because she's very in tune with it. Women tend to be, really, you know what I mean? In tune with it, you know. So yeah.
That's beautiful.
So Kwame, what I would like to ask, I know you touched on it slightly, that you like to help people to tell their stories. Is this something that you actually do as a business? Is this something that our listeners, if there is somebody out there that feels they have a story and they don't really know how they can put it together, how they could even begin, because as you said, it's a process.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to that person?
All right, there's two ways of looking at that. So yes, it is a business for me. So I have two ways of helping someone write, especially if one, because a lot of people nowadays, people don't write anyway. You know what I mean? No, it's not like before where we used to write pen and paper. So a lot of people don't write anymore. So people look on writing as a chore, especially if they don't love writing.
Right. Yeah.
So my role and my purpose is to help someone to basically put the words down and to show them in their own voice and in their own way how they can formulate a story, how they can formulate the chapters, how they can formulate an entire book. So my role is to basically hold their hand through the entire process. So I become the accountability body. I basically say, all right, I'll ask particular questions. If it's nonfiction, because a lot of people tend to, when they're writing personal stories, it's mainly nonfiction and it's about themselves wanting to share. So I would help in regards to holding the hands through that process and get them to explore aspects of the story that they probably didn't think of. So, for example, I have one mentee at the moment who's writing about her experience with breast cancer. I've had a previous mentee who wrote about his experience with having 5 kidney transplants. So I have those type of mentees that I help to share their story, create their voice with their book. And like I said, there's 2 ways. So I hold their hand through that process, or I ghostwrite, which means I'll take on the entire work and write for someone who doesn't want to write. You know, but there's obviously so those are the core of my business at the moment. That business.
Wow. Well, you are definitely a plethora of talent, is what I'm going to say, and
thank you.
You know, it has been really inspiring, actually. There's so many questions buzzing around, and I wish that we had hours to have more conversation.
Because really, that's funny, because there's sorry not to cut you, but there's one. I don't know if now we're gonna have time for me to share from my book. That's one aspect of the book, which is for me the most poignant part of my book, which I want to share with others in regards to a particular experience I had when I went into Ghana. So I don't know if I have the time for that, but I wanted to share that kind of content so that people can understand why the story was written and what they can write for themselves. Is that okay?
Please do.
All right, wonderful. All right, let me see if I can find it.
You know, as you mentioned some of those tips, I think it definitely would be fantastic tips for anyone listening or watching. Having written my workbook, I Am What I Say I Am, that's definitely some good advice I received from my accountability partner, who said, look, just set 15 minutes in your calendar, and that 15 minutes is just to write. It's not to watch TV. It's not to do anything else. It's just to write. And sometimes you might brainstorm. Other times you might write a sentence. But the point is, in that 15 minutes, you get something down. And I do like writing, but I would say, I've got a block. But actually, when you take 15 minutes, it's more doable and digestible, and something comes and the magic starts. So great tip.
Yeah, it is. And I also say to someone, just write a page, whatever it is. Don't worry about the spelling. Don't worry about the grammar. Don't worry about the technical stuff. Just write, just a page. Yeah, and you'll find that you probably will end up writing more than a page. But I would say to many, that's right. That's right, a page. And don't worry about the technicalities of it. Because a lot of people tend to get caught up in this story in their head in regards to the grammar, into the way that the story is set. You don't worry about that. That's why you have a proof, you're an editor for. You don't worry about none of that stuff. Right. You just put it down on paper. But yeah. All righty.
So go ahead, share.
Yeah. So I'm gonna share from my book, and it's from the chapter called Wading Through the Wilderness. And I touched on it earlier, but this goes into detail of the experience that I had at Cape Coast.
Okay.
One of our first trips was to the Cape Coast Enslavement Fort, a whitewashed building on the Ghanaian coastline with parapets that overlook the beach and town. Our guide told us that from the parapets, we could see in the distance the crucifix spires of 3 churches. And for sure, when we ventured to the top of the fort and looked over the town, we saw the churches and the spires, clearly against a bright blue sky, along with hundreds of people living within the city. Within myself, I found it ironic that those who profess to follow the Christ and supposedly love their fellow man allowed a cruel crime of humongous proportions to take place right in their view, or better yet, under their noses. What did that say about them and their religion? I was extremely puzzled. We climbed down steps and made our way into the dungeon below the fort, and there I experienced another phenomenal spiritual moment that has stayed with me to this day. It was dark and foreboding, with a single bulb hanging from a wire, its light bouncing from the walls and the rocky roof, causing shadows to flit against those craggy walls. The atmosphere was stifling, and I felt I had been bundled in with another few hundred people, many of whom I never knew, into a room made for many less than that number. I felt the spirits calling me, and I was without a doubt affected by their presence, their deafening silence embracing me. I was sure that there was an effect on the others too, since most of us, when we re-emerged into the beautiful daylight, were crying. Once in the dungeon, our tour guide showed us a rough line running parallel to the floor. He then showed us a window slit, no bigger than 1 foot high and about half that wide, high up on the uneven wall. Naturally, within the dungeon, daylight could barely be seen. He then explained that because the land outside was level with the bottom of the slit, anytime rain fell, the water made its way into the cell. Imagine hundreds of people packed in a space made for much less than that. Feces, urine, rainwater, grime, all swilling underfoot, knee-high, or waist-high, even shoulder-high, and this in a confined, heat-suffocating place. I cried. We made our way out to the ground floor. Nothing needed to be said by any of us. Once there, we stood by the dungeon entrance, and right beside it was another large wooden door. A huge padlock secured it. I was curious and decided to force it ajar as far as I was able to. I was dumbstruck. A stench assaulted my nose that would stay with me forever, and I still remain to this day unable to describe. When I asked the guide why the room was locked, he said that they, the caretakers or custodians of the fort, were unable to clean it. That's right. They were incapable of getting it cleaned. I was silenced. Here was a room which, after hundreds of years, was still unable to be scrubbed. I repeat, imagine, after hundreds of years, there was still a room that they were unable to scour of the blood, tears, perspiration, excrement, effluent, and death to the time when we visited in 2006. The visit to Cape Coast had a profound effect on me. It changed my outlook on my life, prompting me to appreciate the simple things, giving gratitude to those who went before. The story even continued when I had another spiritual encounter on Labadi Beach. But that's another day.
Thank you for sharing that.
Wow.
You're welcome.
Very powerful stuff.
Yes, it was. Yes, it is.
Thank you very much for sharing that.
Mm.
I was hooked.
Yeah,
but I
definitely.
know that there's only a certain amount that we can share. Can you please let our audience know how they can hear the rest of that story and how they connect with you to even hear more and continue this conversation, please?
Alrighty, yeah. Well, the book itself is available on Amazon or Lulu or Lulu.com. So Amazon, My Date with Depression, From Mental Uncertainty to Self-Fulfillment. So it's available on Amazon by myself, Kwame Mcpherson. Oops. And people can get in contact with me. Kwame, Kwame, M.A. Mcpherson, McPherson, @gmail.com. Or I'm on across social media actually as Author Kwame Mcpherson, so LinkedIn, Facebook, you can find me. And on Instagram, but as Maxkey, MAXKEY. But like I said, Google my name, Kwame Mcpherson, and they'll find me. But the book is available on Amazon and Lulu.com.
Thank you so much, Kwame. You are an epitome of my favorite saying, which is turning your pain into champagne.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
I don't drink champagne. I don't drink champagne. That's all right. But I think that.
Leaving on a lighter note, we always have a closing thought. And just before Marcia and I leave our tags, is there any closing words that you'd like to leave someone who maybe doesn't believe they have a story in them or even know how to use their voice?
That's a good. Well, I always say throughout anyone's life, there are times in that life where someone will have an experience. They'll have a time when they're sharing with someone, where they're inspired someone. And a lot of us have been dumbed down by 9 to 5, but by doing something that we're not happy with, or the place the institution that we're in. So so I would always say to anyone, do not be afraid to explore what you feel. Take time to reflect. And like I said, for the past 2 years, I think for a lot of people, and especially like I said, when it comes to mental health, a lot of people haven't had that time to reflect. So the past 2 years has enabled that. And it's taken time to breathe and to reflect and look back on where one has been and what that experience has with the interaction with other people. It could, someone could be, I don't know, a good talker, and they may just, pick up the phone and someone be inspired by them talking. They could just be in a space where they're helping someone else. They're not even cross the road, whatever it is. It's something very simple, which indicates what they're destined and what they can be passionate about. But it's having the wherewithal to identify what that is. And I think sometimes when we don't take that time to reflect because we're too busy, we miss it. So I would say to anyone,
Absolutely.
take the time to stop and just reflect and see where you have impacted on someone else's life positively and how you felt about that period and that experience. And that may be something that someone can pursue,
Absolutely.
Great advice.
Couldn't agree more. So on that note, you heard it from the horse's mouth. Do take some time. And as you know, we are advocates on this podcast. It's always good to talk, to dig deeper and share your story, use your voice.
Yep.
So you're able to find me, Kai, at iamsimplykai.com or at iamsimplykai on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And you can find Marcia
on being Marcia McLeod on Instagram, where I share daily inspiration, and also you can hop on over to my website where you can find out what is going on in and around my world.
And on that note, we hope you really enjoy this episode and you have been inspired, and we look forward to hearing from you and your comments below. So we'll see you soon, and until next time, it's always good to talk. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Proudly sponsored by Bee Beads. Be different. Handmade with love.